of of being able to make it in what is often a very arduous road to a master's in epi or a master's in what have you, or a PhD, or completing a postdoc, or making it through faculty, that I thought touching on this issue of resilience was important. And my perspective comes from resilience in the academy, which I think can extend to possibly industry and government, but definitely for those of you who are on the academic track, there will be probably some things of interest here. Otherwise, I think that the exercise that I'm proposing will help you with some of the challenges that we can all face in our careers in general. So, let's turn this into presenter mode. All right. So resilience, what is it? So it's the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and or toughness. And I will say that the first time that I wrote a paper and it was returned with red marks all over it and or filled with track changes, that I probably cried because I felt like such a failure and I hadn't, done my job. Not realizing, and I think that as I've gotten older and probably more experienced, although sometimes that's questionable, that I should have actually welcomed that, right? And not viewed it as a deficiency and or something that was wrong with me, but more so that was someone trying to help better me, right? I think sometimes it's done constructively and sometimes it's really just demoralizing. But when it's done well, it really can be really helpful in molding you and shaping you into a better scientist, into a better epidemiologist, what have you. And so I think frame shifting from there's something wrong with me and my work to, oh, this is useful feedback and I'm going to implement it and grow from this, I think is really about how you grow and how you become resilient in your academic settings and or work settings. And so I took this from an article that is posted on this blog called Driven, and the modern definition of resilience. And so many of us are very goal-oriented. We work towards a vision. I like to work backwards from where I'm going. So, when I started my master's program, first year in, I knew I wanted to get a PhD. And so then I said, okay, what are the things that it's going to take for me to get to a PhD program? And then I worked on those. Once I got in the PhD program, I said, what are the things that are going to take me to academic medicine, right? Or a career in academia, and specifically a tenure track position. And so I knew publications were going to be that, writing grants was going to be part of that, and I worked backwards from there so that I had boxes that I could check. Once I got on the faculty, I said, what is it going to take me to get tenure and promotion at UAB? And then I worked backwards from that, and I made sure that in the time that I had from day one on the faculty to when I had in mind that I wanted to go out for tenure and promotion, that I was working on those goals day in and day out. And part of that for me has entailed strategic planning. So much like we did earlier for the MAC, I do that on an annual basis for myself. So I put together an Excel spreadsheet, can't speak, of all of the things that I know it's going to take for me to achieve the goals that I have set for myself. And so on that Excel spreadsheet, I have all of the papers that I'm going to write that year. I have all of the grants that I'm going to write that year, all of the abstracts that I'm going to submit, all of the trips that I'm going to take to conferences and so forth. I also include things that also take my time, like attending my kids' sports, tournaments and what have you, practices, because I think what we forget about being resilient is that you have to have the energy to bounce back, right? And too often we don't take into account all of the things that are outside of work that also take our time and energy. And so that for me includes the kids and my husband and my family and friends and relationships that I'm cultivating outside of the academy so that I can be sane and functional when I'm at work every day. And so we think about work sometimes very much in, what fits into this box. Not realizing that when we talk about work-life balance, it's more like work-life imbalance, right? Because you have to think about it all in concert. You can't think about it all in buckets. And even though we segment what we do hour by hour or day by day, at the end we're impacted by it all, right? And so part of being resilient is taking note of everything that is your life, and planning for those things as much as possible, but also making like a GPS and being flexible in your thinking and in your accomplishment of things. And so much like when you're navigating to a location and you make a wrong turn, what does the GPS do? It recalculates and renavigates, right? And so a flexible mindset is part of being resilient. You have to be able to say, I reached this roadblock, and what am I going to do in order to, make my next location, reach my next goal, and whatever. So I just finished reading a book called Walk the Walk, which is about leadership. And it tells the story of many of the successful leaders in business, including leaders like the founder of McDonald's and FedEx. And they talked about how the founder and or CEO of FedEx was at a meeting, and one of his employees arrived late, like 5 minutes late, and said, I'm so sorry I'm late. The train was in the way. I was on my way here, and I got stuck with the train crossing. And he said, well, why didn't you have a plan B? If you had had a plan B, you might have arrived on time. And that made me think, sometimes we can't plan for that plan B, right? But sometimes we can. And so in my planning, I take into account, for example, I have an October 5th deadline for a grant. I also have an October 21st deadline for another grant. And I know inevitably I and or my children will get sick the week before it's due. Or something will happen, right? And so I have to account for that unaccountability or that uncertainty. And that's just part of what you do to build that resilience, is accounting for the unaccountable sometimes and making sure that you can sort of adjust. And so despite is the be proactive, don't wait for adversity, kind of plan for that adversity. Like, that's inevitable, it's going to happen. And adversity happens both on a large and a small scale. There are challenges that occur every day, and some of us are affected more by the smaller challenges than the larger, and some are affected more by the larger than the smaller. But I think becoming more self-aware of how you function and who you are will help you set your road for success. So I wanted to explore strategies for success moving forward for each of us. Use that to sustain the momentum of your ACE or MAC community network. So part of introducing ourselves today was intentional, so that even if you connect with one other person today and sustain that relationship, I think that will be valuable moving forward in your career. And I will tell you an anecdote. So I used to be very active in APHA, the American Public Health Association, and I initially joined the Epi section, but it was ginormous. It was so big that I felt lost within the Epi section. And so I explored other sections within APHA and found a home within the statistics section, because I've always been interested in methods and statistical methods in particular. So I was at the time a graduate student, and I also belonged to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation New Connections program. I don't know if any of you were part of that. They closed the program, unfortunately, but their network is great. And I think what many organizations can learn from RWJ is the value of the network that is built within RWJ and the value of the connections that are made there. So I sat at a round table like you are sitting at today and met Melody Goodman. Does anybody know Melody Goodman? She just wrote a textbook on statistical methods. She's a health disparities biostatistician. If you don't know her name, you need to know it. She is now at CUNY, somewhere. And she's also on Twitter. So I think it's Goodman the Brain is her tag.
She also has a chapter in the book.
Yeah, oh, in your book?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So that's another reason to get Chandra's book.
She also gave a talk at the MAC workshop that you organized in 2016.
Yes.
And I believe I have a recording of it on the web.
So you can also listen to it there, and Vic has passed out his handout, so you can find the links there.
Send me an email if you can't find it, and I'll look for it.
So I sat next to Melody at the RWJ event, and at the time, RWJ had a New Connections coaching clinic that was in advance of or preceded the APHA meeting. So we literally left the RWJ meeting, crossed the street, and went to the APHA statistics section, where we sat at the table with like 6 other people who were part of the section, and the chair of the committee said, so we have these pages in AJPH, and they need someone to write an article, and we had just come from the coaching clinic at RWJ where they said you need to connect with people and find ways to collaborate. So at the time I was working on my dissertation, and every time that I read an article, people were misusing multivariate regression instead of using multivariable regression in their write-ups of their papers, right? So where you place the Y and how many Y's is important. And so we looked at each other and we said, why don't we write a paper? And so we wrote a paper on multivariate versus multivariable regression that was published in AJPH, and it's our most cited paper to date. And so there's a lot of value in making connections at meetings like this because you have shared interests, right? We're all here because we have some shared interest in health disparities and health equity, or we're all, or we're a URM, or we're something. Something is going to connect you to somebody else in this group, and it's going to make a difference in your career. So sustain that momentum. And then identify other resources that might help you get support and or advance your professional goals. So let's take just a brief moment to make some notes about your current stage of career. And I just want you to think, maybe you don't have any challenges that you're facing, but I want you to think about some of the challenges that you're facing at this time. And then we're going to talk about how to navigate those challenges moving forward. So actually, let's not take 5 minutes. Let's take 3 minutes because it's 4:57. And at 5 o'clock, we're going to convene, and then we're going to do a poll. So get your phones out. We're going to do a poll thing online where we're going to anonymously talk about some of the challenges that we're facing. So let's do that for 3 minutes. And this can be in your career, with your mentors, supervisors. And if you get done early, what you'll do is you'll text your answer to 22333. Or you can go online as well.
Can you say that number again?
You text this first, so Bertha Hidalgo, no O, 428-222-333 to join, and then you can text your response.
I can't believe you shared your password like that.
Yeah.
Does it have to be all caps?
Maybe.
Okay. So I said no. It said work with no caps.
Yeah, there's no O at the end. Is it not working?
What's the noodle? Is it 428?
438. Yep.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so it worked for somebody.
You're the first one, you already know. Phone number.
All right, good. They're coming in. We heard of one faculty position earlier today.
Anybody put that up there, please come talk.
You can't, did you go online?
It always does this to me though.
Oh, okay.
Is someone else on?
Yeah, do you want to give it to someone who's,
I was just gonna put my answer with someone who had it up. Do you have yours up?
You wanna put it in my phone?
yeah. Okay, that might have done all of it. So, managing expectations, arbitrary discriminatory publishing practices, figuring out the path to tenure, saturation of research topics, okay? Let's see, not move this.
Is that you order them?
tenure that's very institutional dependent and sometimes even department dependent. So my advice is always, always find out what your department and or school says about what the requirements are for tenure and promotion. Sometimes they're very vague, but you need to query your fellow faculty. You know, if you're a graduate student or postdoc and you're contemplating a tenure track position, really talk to people about what that entails. Arbitrary and discriminatory publishing practices. I think Dr. Mays would have been a good insight about this. She has served on editorial boards, and I don't know if anyone here has, but if you do, we would welcome that insight. Training, finding my research niche, reframing research. This, I think, is actually a really great topic because I think that there is a lot of creativity that we neglect in thinking about our research topics, which actually speaks to the other point that was on here about saturation of research topics, right? I think as a graduate student, I felt like sometimes what I wanted to talk about or research was very heavily explored. But there's a lot to be said about the creativity with which you approach a topic, right? And the angle that you take in analyzing the data and presenting the data and the perspective that you bring to that. And so I think don't be afraid to delve into a topic that maybe has been published on for years, because I think that no one will have your perspective, right? And or your view on the data. And so I think that's important to consider as you work through that research. Preserving, distributing, discarding accumulated papers. Is that you, Meg?
Why do you ask?
Hey, Bertha,
Yes.
going back to that earlier one about reframing,
Yep.
what do you think about the issue of also looking at what's the next stage in the spectrum of translation? I think a lot of people, especially epidemiologists, kind of get stuck in, I need to look for risk factors, not really move this bill forward, and but what's the next step? How do I actually intervene? What do you think about that? Is it possible, instead of reframing, just kind of an extension of?
Yep. I think that's excellent advice. And I actually just completed a fellowship on implementation science and dissemination, IMS, at UCSF. And so I spent 3 summers there studying implementation science. And I think there is a lot to be gained by, did Dr. Mays say this or someone else, about that continuing education, right? And I think maybe about gaining those additional skills that I think are needed sometimes to help you reframe and reshift and extend your findings in your field. And so I was an applied epidemiologist as a PhD student studying HPV infection, and then they said to me, they being the wiser people that were my mentors, said if you're going to study something new, the postdoc is the time to do it. And so I went from being an applied epidemiologist to taking a postdoc in statistical genetics. And it was, a nosedive into the deep end, and I am not a good swimmer. And so it was a very steep learning curve, but it has made a world of difference in my career and its trajectory and what I have been able to do and accomplish with the goals that I had for my science. And so I think, to your point, Rohit, that there is a lot to be gained by those extensions of research. Okay, so let's cover a couple more, and then I'm going to walk you through finding a faculty position. We heard about one today. Really, I think a lot of this also extends to your network. I used to go to meetings, and you always have to have